Hi, it's Tubby. I'm back to continue my conversation with Karen Shoemaker, one medium rare. We're discussing her 19 near death experiences and what she has learned and what she brought back with her when she returned to body after crossing over. And in this segment, we're going to talk about the human journey, the hardships, you know, why why do bad things happen? Karen is qualified to answer this because, well, you've had a quite a life, ups and lots of ups and downs.
Working from a nursing school to accounting to law to studying addictions therapy, becoming a counselor in addictions, um, meeting street people to movie stars, millionaires, you name it, I've done it.
I find it interesting that you shared that you knew the that you were going to marry your first husband, and you also knew that you would not be married to him for long because he would die. Is that correct?
Dovey, I used to have dreams, a lot of dreams, especially after that first near death. Um, so in the dream, I'm like 13 years old. And most people at 13 aren't even thinking about marriage, never mind anything else.
Okay.
They're just doing the fun things with school and friends and all that type of stuff. But in that dream, I saw myself being married by this particular man, saw his face, saw his figure, everything, and knew his name was Jack. Okay? So I thought, okay, Jack, well then I get Barker. I had no idea who this man was.
Wow.
So anyway, I see myself marrying this very tall, very slender man, blue eyes, reddish hair, very curly. Um, and then, as we were introduced by this Reverend Barker, he turns into a shorter, barrel-chested man, which I later married. And I knew I was going to marry him and my life would be miserable. So everybody has a story. Everybody falls into patterns, trying to protect themselves. They wind up lying. In their lies, they wind up believing their lies and their stories. I'm about getting real. And that's why I'm very direct about what I see. A lot of people fight me on it. They tell me I'm wrong. And I just wait because I know eventually their voice is going to change and then the real story is going to come out.
When
Which
you
it
get
does.
past the barriers that they create.
When I get past all those barriers of energetic walls that they have created around themselves because they feel the need to protect themselves. To give you an example, somebody's raped. I went through that in my life. Hardships. We all have stories. So when I meet a woman that I know has gone through that, it's very easy for me to allow the compassion to bubble up and to bubble out. So they feel less afraid of me. I think that's why I look more like everybody's mother, okay? Um, I'm not your normal, beautiful psychic.
You are beautiful.
I'm beautiful in an energetic way that I agree with. And, we are so limited in these physical bodies that we're always looking for a feel-good in some way, shape, or form. So that became very evident to me. But what really became evident was how people build these walls without realizing they're building them. They don't always even give it a second thought. Um, it's what I later, when I became an addictions counselor, I developed several courses that I taught, that I used with the clients, and the changes in them was amazing. So I've learned to listen to my inner self, my inner being, more than I listen to the outside. But, people try and test me all the time, and it's like, okay, so you're a prove it to me person. You want it proven to you.
Well, let's back up a little bit and talk about your first husband, Jack.
Jack was the minister. My
Okay.
first husband's name was Daniel. And very, like I said, very gorgeous young man. But he was 4 years older. I married at 17.
So you dreamed about him at 13.
Married him
Married
at
him at
17. I was married by a man known as Reverend Jack Barker. So I knew him before I ever met him.
Okay, but in your dream, you were told that.
That I wouldn't be married long. I knew that because when we were introduced to the people in the church, he changed. He wasn't the same man. He was a short man, barrel-chested, brown-haired. I married a man that had light reddish blonde hair, blue eyes. And then all of a sudden, he's introduced and he's a shorter man, that was maybe 5'7" on a good day, because I was a good inch taller than him.
Okay.
And, I knew that we would not be married long. I didn't understand exactly how, but that became evident right before it happened. So I saw his death before it happened as well.
In a dream or a vision?
I was at work. I was working in the records facility at a bank. I was doing what they called, it's typing the little numbers on the checks, and they would put in the amounts of the check on the check. And everybody's account was just notified that way. So I happened to be at work. All of a sudden I just stopped. I couldn't move. My boss was walking behind me and he says, "Karen, what are you doing?" I said, "The phone's going to ring for me. It's not good news." I said, "You're the one that's going to tell me, but you're going to lie to me." And I said, "I know, I got to get somewhere really fast." And I said, "I think it deals with my sister, but it's not really my sister. My mother's there. And I'm screaming at my mother. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it." So what happens is at 2:10 p.m. in the afternoon, the phone rings. He looks at it. He goes into his office. He picks it up. He's staring at me through the glass window of his office. And then he calls me into his office and he says, "I don't know how you knew, but you've got to go to your sister's house. And they need you to take the bus." And I just looked at him and I says, "Okay." So I'm riding on the bus, and I knew before I got to my sister's apartment that my husband was dead. He had been cleaning a gun, and it went off, and it shot him in the heart. Very traumatic. So people have traumas in their life. With each trauma I experienced, the more I thought I had done something wrong, and I was being, made responsible by God or whatever. And so I felt a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. And over the years, with each thing that took place, that shame and guilt grew to such a point that I hated myself and my life. And I know a lot of people out there feel the same. and they don't want to face it. This is why they do drugs. This is why people are sexually promiscuous. There's a lot of reasons that people do what they do. And I do not blame any of them. Not a one. So, that's what I mean about being real and yet being compassionate.
Yeah.
And for us to step back and understand someone from their story viewpoint, most people don't know how to do. And it's sad that we're like that. Because I know, having had the experiences that I have had, people are more than they will ever realize.
Well, it's nice we have you to remind us and show us how to see that within ourselves. But, so how many times were you married, Karen?
I was married two. I was actually supposed to marry a third time between my first and my second. So
Okay.
he was actually the second. After my first husband died, I went to the cemetery and I'm standing there and I see this young man and he's pushing a, double thing with, like a buggy for kids.
Okay.
A
like
stroller.
A stroller.
I couldn't think what to call it. Old age, what can I say? So anyway, I go over and I look at her and I said, I'm so sorry.
Hmm.
And I said, when did she pass? And he goes, well, how do you know who passed? And I said, that was your wife, wasn't it? And he looked at me and he says, yeah, how do you know that? Well, his name was Dennis, and Dennis was going to wind up being a very important factor in my life.
Hmm.
Because when I was raped, Dennis was in the squad car that was driving by this guy's apartment when I come running out, totally naked, blood running down my legs. But, that's a little deep for people right now, so I won't go into that. But he is the one that wound up saving my life, as well as helping me deal with certain things, and I was helping him deal with his wife and his twin kids, because she died in childbirth. So these children were very, very young. And he and I started to date. We were due to get married. 1 week before we were due to get married, he was shot and killed in the line of duty. He was a Cincinnati cop. So everybody has stories.
Okay. So you were widowed after how many years of marriage to your first husband?
I was 17 when I married him. He died when I was 19.
19. And then shortly after that you met Dennis, who you did love and were in a relationship with.
And then he was killed. Okay, but one thing I've got to put across that I sometimes forget about is when Dan died, I went to 17 funerals within 2 weeks. And the 17th was my husband. The 16 prior deaths were his friends that were in Vietnam.
Hmm. Did you see that as sort of an omen?
I looked at it as, somewhere I must have done something really, really wrong.
So the story was beginning for you.
It was beginning. And, it just increased over the years to where, like I said, I got to the point where I hated myself so much that, I didn't want to live anymore. And, a lot of us don't want to admit that. It makes us sound like we're crazy. We're not crazy. We're upset.
Right.
We're lost for a while. Anger comes out, all different kinds of emotion. And most of us wind up going into therapy to understand those emotions. But this isn't about that. This is about people trying to hide those things that have been in their lives that have upset them, made them angry, whatever, and they can't and don't know how to deal with it. It's like our political system nowadays. A lot of stuff going on there, and people just have to understand.
Oh, okay, so to kind of get the timeline of your life, when did you lose Dennis? When he was
7
killed?
years old, first NDE. Second thing was marrying Danny, and that all coming to pass. Third thing was seeing his death, his passing, when I was 19. So 7 to 19 is only 6 years. Okay? Then I meet Dennis approximately 9 months later. Okay? So I dated, but I didn't really want to date because you feel like you're cheating on your husband.
Okay.
So it takes a little while to
Yeah.
adapt to, but it was just one of those things that was instantaneous between Dennis and I. So the closeness was there. We both knew it, both felt it, and we were willing to sidestep the death of our spouses to be kindred spirits to each other. And he needed a mother for his children. He didn't have anybody. You know, he had his mother and father, and he had one brother. And that was, like I said, 9 months to 1 year later after Dan's death.
Okay.
After that, I did not date for almost 11 years.
But something very traumatic happened while Dennis, the Cincinnati officer, was in your life. You did go on a date with a man, and what happened there?
This man, he came across like all American, very polite, open doors for you, closed car doors for you. Like I said, he was like Mr. All-American. And he got me to the point where I began to trust him a little bit, and he invited me up to his apartment. I walk in, the next thing I know, he's got my arms behind me. He puts Velcro around my wrists. He strips me, puts me on the bed, and then he takes a scalpel from the doctor's office where he worked, and he cut my left ovary out. And because of that, I don't know where I found the strength, but I managed to get that Velcro to break away. Because my clothes had been cut, I had nothing to put on. I really believed this man was out to kill me. And so I fought it. I finally went, you know, Dennis drove by, he sees me running down the street. I'm bleeding because, you know, he cut the ovary out through my vaginal area and also through the side of me here. So I've got a scar on that left side. And running out there, he sees me. He pulls the squad car over. They call other squad cars. I mean, there must have been 9 squad cars showed up to try and get this guy before he disappeared. Well, they couldn't find him for 2 weeks. And in that meantime, I spoke with the newspaper. I put it out there, and as I did that, 5 other women came forward. But I had met his son. His son was like 6, 7 years old, same age as my daughter at the time. And, well, she was 6 because Danny died 6 years later after, you know, or I'm getting jumbled here a little bit. But anyway, she was young enough that she was the same age as his child. So may have been a little bit longer before I actually began dating. And because of what happened, that's when I shut down again. That's what happened. So it was like, okay, fine. So saves me. We do that. They bring him out. I kept telling the judge, I said, he's done something to his son. You need to check his son. So they had children's services come in. They called the son's mother. They checked the son, and they find out that his father sodomized him.
This man had done this before to other women.
He did it to the other 5 women that came forward.
The other women were too scared and traumatized to go to the police until you did. Is that right?
It wound up in the newspaper. I put out there, if there are any other women that knew this man, to come forward to the courts. You don't have to talk to anybody but this particular person. And I listed the name. It was printed in the paper. Mm-hmm. So, that happened. They did the court date. The judge, for his molestation and damage he did to us as women, he only got 10 years. Okay, but after checking his son and adding that to the sentence, he got a total of 30 years.
So is he in prison, as far as you know?
He was in prison for a long, long time. He got out 2 years ago. I don't know where he is. I don't care to know. Mm-hmm. But I do wish him well. Because he was a messed up mind, a sociopath, and just used sex as that weapon to control. So the compassion level that I learned in these NDEs, like I said, has been so rewarding. Mm-hmm. And it's made me look at life a whole lot different.
Okay, so after your assault and rape, you were still with Dennis, the police officer, who just happened to be driving by right when you needed him, and you were running out of that man's house.
Mm-hmm. And then, like I said, 9 months to 1 year later, we were due to get married. And 1 week before our marriage, I, was getting everything prepared. And his brother comes to my place, and he looks at me and he says, "Karen, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And he bursts into tears, and I looked at him and I said, "He's gone, isn't he?" That's all I said.
Did you have knowledge that, Dennis would also be taken?
I would get impressions, but I didn't want to look at it. Yeah. Okay, because of everything else I had been through up to that point, that's where I wanted to shut down that psychic ability. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to see stuff for myself. So, I knew, but I didn't acknowledge. Okay. Is the best way to word it.
And like you've been saying, we just kind of protect ourselves, and
which is what I did do for a number of years. And then I met the man that became my second husband. I knew he would make my life miserable, which he did do.
What was his name?
James.
Jim, okay.
Okay. I knew my son would be born of him, and I always knew that I would never be a grandmother at all.
Okay, and how did you know these things? How did you know you were going to meet and marry Jim? And how did you know that? And how did you know that you were going to have a very unhappy life with him?
Well, it was funny because I met Jim right at the time where the fire took place at the restaurant in northern Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And I was out at a Parents Without Partners function. Mm-hmm. And, the kids were there, I was there, Jim was there with his daughter who had come down to visit him. So we met, and we hit it off, and from there I started holding functions for parents without partners, and I was having a get together, and I knew he would be there, and I knew we'd wind up married. It was just another one of those things that I knew about my own life that I didn't want to view at all. So I tried to push it away because I saw where I would really, really work hard in this marriage. And, you know, he'd be up and down and in and out, and it just wasn't making a lot of sense. It was kind of jumbled to me. And again, I had shut down allowing that knowledge to come through me.
So, I wondered if you knew that you would not have a good relationship with Jim, what made you move forward to go ahead and marry him?
Well, when you get pregnant by a guy, and we're old-fashioned, and his family thought we should marry, my family thought we should marry, and that's a story in itself, because the day of my wedding, I drove myself to the church, and I turned around at least 7 times. And my maid of honor says, "Karen, make up your mind." I says, "Well, I don't want to marry the guy. I just wanted to have sex with him."
Okay.
I didn't expect to get pregnant, but here I am. And she goes, "Well, do you love him at all?" And I said, "Well, maybe a little bit." And I think for the next 17 years, I kept trying to talk myself into the fact I loved him.
And this is something a lot of people do. We you know, you probably, your clients and people you read for, you probably see this a lot. Where your head and your heart probably tells you something different.
It definitely told me something different, and again, I wasn't willing to listen, but my life started to take some major changes towards the end of that marriage. We divorced in 1993, and as we divorced, I'm an artist by, fun. That's what I do for fun. And I'm painting the same man over and over and
You were just seeing this man in your mind, dreaming about him, or
I would have
visions?
dreams about him. I'd be sitting outside meditating, and I'd see his face. I'd see, his hair change color. And it was like, but I'm not meeting him in the state of Ohio.
Okay, for how long were you painting this man that you would see in your dreams and visions?
I would say about 2 years, because it took me 2 years to finally tell my husband, this isn't working. My son, like most kids, got into drugs. We found out my son was full-blown schizophrenic, and because of that, there was a separation between us. My son went into a coma, almost died, and instead of grabbing him and being glad he was alive, he showed his worry and stress and concern by smacking him.
Your husband?
My husband. So, I didn't understand that. That wasn't loving his son, giving him support, giving him whatever. So, that's where my human side came out and says, I ain't dealing with this. And so I'm meditating at work one afternoon, and I hear very, very loud, "We are moving you to Florida, where you will do radio and television for us, and you will see, and your life will make a major, drastic change."
Real quickly, when you say you hear voices or hear this clearly, do you hear the way I'm speaking to you, but it's in your ear, in your head?
Well, hearing is maybe the wrong term, because I don't hear voices, I don't see things. You just sit there and you get what I call the knowing. The knowing strikes you. It leaves no question in your mind. So, you get this sudden realization of things that are about to occur, and you don't question it.
It's a different sensory organ that we
It's
haven't
very
developed or are aware of
Yeah.
here.
You know, I didn't know what string theory was. I didn't know what a lot of stuff was. And I started hearing all this. Well, not hearing, but knowing all this.
Yeah.
And it's like, where did that knowing come from? And as I questioned, I was led from one major teacher to another.
We'll have to talk more about that too. But um, so you're in your marriage with Jim. It's not working out. You're being guided and told that you're going to move from Ohio to Florida to do radio and other networking, and on a personal level, your life would be changing. And also at the same time, you've been painting pictures of this man you haven't met or seen in real life. Okay, so how were you moved down to Florida physically? How did that come
Well,
about?
my mother got very, very sick. I was very close to my mother. When she died, my children were fairly grown. I mean, my son was at that time 16. My daughter was, 9 years older.
Okay.
So I didn't have to worry about them per se. So I looked at my husband, Jim, and I said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I'm taking $65 in my clothes. And I left. And I heard from a girlfriend I hadn't heard from in 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
And she asked me to come down to Florida, and she sent me a plane ticket. So that's how I got there. And I'm there maybe 2 weeks when I do a reading for a man she introduces me to, and I wind up on radio.
He was the owner of the radio station. Is that right?
Correct.
And he was so impressed with you, he just wanted you on board for his projects.
He wound up putting me on my own radio station, my own channel. He gave me a prime time, which surprised me. But the accuracy with the reading I gave him was so direct, so dead on, that he felt other people should benefit from my gifts. And I consider them gifts now.
They are gifts, and I can attest to that, Karen, whenever I see her in different social settings, like I said, in our IANDS group or wherever, people just gravitate towards you. They just, you've seen that at your, various places of employment, friends of friends who, whenever you're out and about and people start talking to you and you just, open up and let the information flow, and they're floored because you just met this person and you know things about them. And
well, as you know, the one testimonial I got from John is so complimentary, and he was just one of those individuals that I met at IANDS group, and IANDS is the International Association of Near-Death Experiences, and they had asked me to talk, and we all went to lunch afterwards, and as we're sitting there, I looked at him and I knew what I knew.
yeah,
I knew he was writing a book about death and grieving. I knew he had lost his 2 sons and his wife.
mm-hmm.
I described them to him. I said he had a photograph of his wife on his mantle in his house, above the fireplace. And he just looked at me and said, "How did you know that?"
That's that, just knowing.
That's just that knowing. Very profound. Very profound.
I experienced something similar in an out-of-body experience. So we kind of were talking about, this universal intelligence where there is no more linear time as we know it. and you are one with all souls and consciousness, whatever word you want to use, God or source or whoever, and all knowledge and information is just permeating. It's just there. And you're able to bring that back down into this physical realm where there are, by design, just, blinders, veils, boundaries, but we can talk more on that later. So you are still in tune with that, just that knowing that is creation.
That's the fun part. My last NDE was a trip and a half, and that one I can't wait to share. I'll be patient.
We have a
I
lot
don't
to
know how
cover.
long I'll be patient, but I'll be patient.
We'll get to all of that, but first we gotta, just kind of introduce you and let people know your story and what a amazing, wild story you do have, and because of you've really walked in a mile in everyone's shoes, and for that reason you're very qualified to give the loving guidance that you do, and in such a compassionate way, because you've been there, probably, whatever the situation is.
Debbie, I'd like to end this section by saying, that people are more than they know. Their stories are better than they know.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them think they've always done something wrong, chosen wrong, picked wrong, done the wrong thing. You've got people like movie stars and musicians that really go out there and they bang the soil and they make a name for themselves, and a lot of people follow them because of it. Because everybody wants to be pronounced, they want to be accepted. And, there's no greater rush than being in front of the public belting out a song, knowing that you're accepted because of that. Mm-hmm. So, it can get really, really dicey with certain things, but the beauty of it is, it's life. Mm-hmm. And life is beautiful.
And our real story is beautiful, so we should maybe stop telling ourselves stories that come from, our past experiences that tell us we're not worthy, we're broken, we did something wrong, we must, Would you agree?
Well, that's where I taught you about Drop Dead Fred. Drop Dead Fred is what I taught clients, drug addicts, teachers, it didn't matter, that we have an inner voice in our head. It never has anything good to say. It's always lying for us. And then if it can't get us with our lies, it becomes our best friend and says, oh, you're so good. They don't understand that you're that good. So I just love Drop Dead Fred, but I became very aware of those thought patterns that, it's never got anything good to say, and yet we listen to it, mm-hmm. and we follow it. Why?
And we'll talk about the amazing shift people experience when they learn to stop telling themselves as stories that are not true, and stop believing things that they've held on to as fact. Just stories and we've picked up along the way.
A real quick example of that, because I worked with a lot of women, these beautiful girls would come to see me, and their self-esteems were so bad, they had to go get the boob job, they had to go get their nose fixed, they had to get their tush tucked. And I would sit there and look at them and go, you're pretty as it is. What are you trying to change here? You're trying to become a new person? What's your Drop Dead Fred saying to you? Well, I'm not pretty enough. My boyfriend likes big boobs. I said, so you go and you buy a pair. I said, really, that's the beauty of our life? You at least are able to do that if you want to. But man, to me, what a waste of time. Be who you are, accept who you are, love who you are, and experience who you are.
And see how much of that just comes to you in really unexpected ways. Kind of working with that universal intelligence, allowing that universal flow really makes your life very magical in healthy and happy in ways you can't imagine. So we'll leave it for there, like there for now, and then we'll continue our conversation and soon. Thanks for watching.
Bye.